Before starting, if you want to access our exclusive BL stories, you can follow our Patreon page. Link in the channel description. So let's begin. The alarm did not sound like I remembered. It should have. 7 years is enough time for a sound to carve itself into bone. But when the lights flickered and the sirens cut through the 4th floor stacks, I did not recognize it at first. I thought it was part of the building's routine test. Tuesday, 3:15. I checked my watch before my body checked itself. Then the smoke reached me. It came through the ventilation like something alive. Thin at first. Then gray. Then the kind of gray that sits low and waits for you to breathe it in. I had been sorting accession records for the Langley collection. Old files. Paper so dry it crackled when I turned the pages. The smoke settled over them like dust, and I remember thinking, someone will have to recatalog these. That was the thought before the memory hit. The alarm changed pitch. Or maybe my ears changed. The sound dropped, sharpened, became something that did not come from a speaker. It came from inside my chest. A frequency I had not heard in 7 years. And my body remembered before my mind did. I stopped breathing. Not the way you stop breathing when you are startled. The way you stop breathing when your body decides that air is not worth the cost of what comes next. My hands hit the desk. Flat. The gloves I always wore pressed against the wood. The gloves I always wore, even in summer, even when no one asked, even when the heat made my palms sweat. Because what was underneath them was not meant to be seen. Some scars are not meant to be seen. I heard his voice saying it. I heard the exact cadence. The way he said it, like a lesson. Like a gift. My name is Hollis Mercer. I am an Omega. For 7 years, I have been an archivist at the Ashford Municipal Records Office, where I process documents that no one reads and catalog files that no one requests. It is the kind of job that makes you invisible. I chose it for that reason. The alarm kept screaming. I stood up. The smoke was thicker. Someone was shouting in the hallway, a beater from the 2nd floor, telling everyone to evacuate. I heard feet. Doors. The shuffle of people who did not believe the fire was real but moved anyway because rules are rules. I did not move. My hands were on the desk. My gloves were damp. The scarred tissue underneath them. The old burns that ran from my wrists to my knuckles, hidden beneath black fabric every single day for 7 years, began to ache. Phantom pain. The body lying to itself. Or telling the truth. I have never been able to tell the difference. The door opened. I did not turn. I could not. The sound of the alarm had locked something in my spine. I knew I should move. I knew the building was filling with smoke. I knew the evacuation protocols I had memorized: stairwell C, exit through the loading bay, assembly point behind the municipal lot. I knew all of it. I could not make my legs work. Sir. A voice. Low. Not urgent. Not shouting over the alarm. Somehow beneath it. The kind of voice that does not compete with chaos. It waits for chaos to pass. I turned. He was tall. That was the first thing I noticed. Tall and built like someone who had never needed to prove it. Dark hair. Gray at the temples. A coat that cost more than my monthly salary. Tailored, charcoal, the kind of coat that belonged in boardrooms, not burning municipal archives. He stood in the doorway like the smoke did not touch him. Evander Blackthorne. I knew his name because I had processed his company's records. Business licenses. Property transfers. The kind of documents a man like him signs and never looks at. I had seen his signature 20 times. I had never seen his face. He was looking at me. Not through me. At me. The way you look at a person. Not a problem to be solved. His eyes moved from my face to my hands, still pressed flat on the desk. And I saw something cross his expression. A recognition. Not of me. Of the position. He knew what frozen looked like. Come with me, he said. Not a question. Not an order. A statement of fact, like he had already decided that I would. And there was no point pretending otherwise. I did not move. He stepped into the room. The smoke curled around his shoulders. He did not cough. He reached the edge of my desk and I watched his hand. Bare, no gloves, nothing to hide, rest on the surface. Not touching me. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of proximity. "We have about 4 minutes before the ceiling comes down," he said. "The fire started in the basement electrical room. It is moving faster than the sprinkler system was designed to handle. Stairwell C is clear." I checked. I stared at him. "Stairwell C," I repeated. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Yes." He did not look away from my face. "The one you memorized. The one that opens onto the loading bay. You know the route." I did not ask how he knew. I did not ask why he was here. I did not ask any of the questions that would come later, in the quiet hours after, when I would lie awake and replay every second of this moment. I only asked one thing. "You checked the stairwell for me?" It was not a question. He answered anyway. "Yes." The alarm changed pitch again. I flinched. My body did it before I could stop it. A full body recoil, the kind that belongs to animals, not people. My hands came off the desk and crossed in front of my chest. The gloves stretched tight over my fingers. Evander Blackthorne watched me flinch. He did not pretend he had not seen it. He did not look away to spare me the embarrassment. He watched, and his expression did not change to pity or concern or any of the things I had learned to dread. It stayed still, present, like he was taking note of a fact he would return to later. "I am going to put my hand on your shoulder," he said, "and I am going to walk you to stairwell C. When we reach the door, you will go ahead of me. If you need to stop, you tell me. If you need me to carry you, you tell me. Do you understand?" I understood that he had just described a level of care I had stopped believing existed. "Yes." His hand landed on my shoulder. Warm, heavy, steady. It did not pull. It did not rush. It simply rested there. A point of contact that said, "I am here and I am not leaving you in this room." I moved. We walked through the smoke. The hallway was empty by then. Everyone else had evacuated. The lights flickered. The alarm was still screaming. But with his hand on my shoulder, the sound did not reach me the same way. It was still terrible, but it was no longer inside my chest. He held the stairwell door open. I went through. He followed. The concrete stairs were cold. The air was cleaner. I stopped on the landing, halfway down, because my legs had started shaking. The adrenaline that had frozen me was thawing, and thawing felt like falling. He stopped too. "Take your time." I leaned against the wall. My gloves were wet from my palms. I looked down at my hands, covered, hidden, safe, and I heard myself say something I had not planned to say. "The alarm. I know it sounds like a normal fire alarm, but the frequency. There is a specific frequency. It." I stopped. "Someone taught you to be afraid of it," he said. Not a question. I looked up at him. He was standing one step below me, which made us almost the same height. The smoke had settled in his coat. He did not seem to notice or care. "I have been an archivist for 7 years," I said. "I have never told anyone that." He nodded. Like that made sense. Like he had known, somehow, that there was a reason for the careful way I moved, the gloves, the way I never stood too close to anyone. "You do not have to tell me anything," he said, "but if you ever want to." He stopped. The alarm cut off. The silence that followed was louder than the sound had been. "Let's get you outside," he said. He did not put his hand on my shoulder again. He did not need to. I followed him down the stairs, and the whole time, I was thinking about the way he had said someone taught you to be afraid of it. Not like he was guessing. Like he knew exactly what it meant to be taught fear. If this story is finding you at a moment when you need to know that being seen does not always mean being hurt, stay. There are more stories like this one. I did not see him for 3 weeks after that. The fire was ruled an electrical malfunction. The building was closed for repairs. I worked from home, a small apartment I rented near the river, where the windows faced a brick wall and the radiator clicked all winter. I processed digital records. I wore my gloves even when no one was watching. I told myself I had imagined the way he looked at me. That is what I tell myself, usually. That whatever I saw in someone's eyes was not there. That I invented the warmth because I needed it. It is safer that way. It keeps me from hoping, and hoping is the thing that gets omegas like me destroyed. But I could not forget the way he said yes. Not the word itself. The way it arrived. No hesitation. No calculation. Just a fact he had already decided before I asked. I checked his company's records again. Blackthorne Holdings. Real estate development and historic property restoration. A portfolio of buildings he had saved from demolition, converted into low-income housing and community spaces. I had processed the paperwork. I had never connected the name to the work. He did not buy buildings to tear them down. He bought them to keep them standing. I closed the file. I told myself it meant nothing. People are complicated. A man who restores buildings could still be the kind of man who destroys people. I knew that better than most. But I kept the file open. 3 weeks after the fire, the archives reopened. I arrived at my usual time, 6:40, early enough to avoid the crowded elevator. The building smelled like new paint and replaced wiring. My desk was exactly where I had left it. The Langley accession records had been moved to dry storage. Everything was ordinary. I sat down. I put my gloves on. I checked them 3 times, once at my desk, once at the door, once in the elevator. Same habit. Same ritual. Then I saw the envelope. It was on my keyboard. Cream-colored. No stamp. My name in handwriting I did not recognize. I opened it. Inside was a card. No company logo. No letterhead. Just a short message in the same careful handwriting. I hope you are well. The records you requested have been transferred to the restored annex. They will be waiting for you. E.B. I stared at the card. I had not requested any records. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in my desk drawer, underneath the stack of blank cataloging forms, where no one would see it. I did not allow myself to think about what it meant. I went back to work. That evening, I stayed late. The building was quiet. I was sorting microfiche when I heard someone enter the reading room. The footsteps were deliberate, measured, the kind of steps that announce themselves without demanding attention. I looked up. Evander Blackthorne stood in the doorway. Same coat, same stillness. His hands were empty. He was not holding papers or a briefcase or any of the things that would have given me a reason to explain his presence. He was simply there. Mr. Mercer, he said. Mr. Mercer. Not Hollis. Not the archivist. My name. Mr. Blackthorne, I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. He nodded toward the card on my desk, visible now, because I had taken it out to read it one more time before putting it away. You found my note. Yes. I wanted to make sure you knew the annex is available. I did not request any records. No. He said it simply. You did not. A pause. The air between us felt like it was holding its breath. I had a reason for being in the archives that night, he said. A property transfer I was verifying. But I stayed because of the way you touched your gloves. Before the alarm. I saw you adjust them. 3 times. I felt my chest tighten. People who check their gloves that carefully are usually hiding something, he said. And people who hide something that carefully are usually worth protecting. I did not know what to say. I had spent 7 years building a life in which no one noticed me. And this man, this alpha who had no reason to care, had seen in one night what everyone else had missed for years. I am not asking you to tell me anything, he said. I am only telling you that the annex door is never locked. If you ever need a place where no one will look for you. He turned, walked toward the door. Mr. Blackthorne. He stopped. Did not turn around. The fire alarm, I said. The frequency. It was my ex-husband. He used to. I stopped. My hands were shaking. He used to lock me in a room and set off different alarms until I told him what he wanted to know. The fire alarm was the worst. I do not know why. Maybe because it sounded like help that was not coming. Silence. He turned around. And I saw something in his face that I had not seen in anyone's face in 7 years. Rage. Pure. Controlled. held so tightly that the only visible sign was the way his jaw shifted. "I am glad you told me," he said. Then he left. And I sat in the empty reading room, my gloves pressed flat on the desk, listening to the sound of his footsteps fade down the hallway, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life, or the first right decision. The break-in happened on a Thursday. I arrived at 6:40, same as always. The building was quiet. The night guard, a beater named Terence who always nodded at me but never spoke, was not at his post. The front door was unlocked. Not broken. Not forced. Just unlocked, like someone had used a key. I stopped in the lobby. The elevator was on the 4th floor. Too early for any of the staff. The lights were on in the reading room. They should not have been. I should have called security. I should have turned around and walked out and waited on the curb until someone in authority arrived. That is what a sensible person would have done. That is what I had trained myself to do. Stay invisible. Stay safe. Do not draw attention. But the archives were my responsibility. Every document, every file, every sealed record that no one was supposed to access. I knew where they were. I knew what they contained. And I knew that someone had been in my building with a key they should not have had. I took the stairs. 2nd floor. 3rd. The door to the 4th floor hallway was propped open with a fire extinguisher. Not forced. Propped. Like whoever had done it was not worried about being caught. The hallway was empty. The lights in the reading room were visible through the glass partition. I walked toward them. My hands were steady. My gloves were dry. I was proud of that later, that my body did not betray me in the moment when I needed it most. I reached the door. The reading room was pristine. Chairs pushed in. Tables empty. The microfiche reader was off. The computer terminals were dark. Nothing was out of place except one thing. The stack room door was open. Not ajar. Open. The heavy fire door that was supposed to be locked at all times was standing wide open, and the light inside was on. The stack room held the sealed archives. I walked toward it. My footsteps sounded too loud on the tile floor. I reached the doorway and looked inside. The cabinets were undisturbed. The files were in order. Everything looked exactly as it should have, except for the single folder lying open on the central table. I recognized it immediately. It was the Langley collection. The same records I had been sorting the night of the fire. The same ones I had watched be moved to dry storage after the smoke damage. Someone had brought them back. Someone had opened them. Someone had left them on the table like an invitation. I did not touch the folder. I backed out of the room. I called security from the hallway phone, my voice steady, my hands only slightly shaking. They never found evidence of forced entry. The security cameras showed nothing. A gap in the footage, exactly 3 minutes and 14 seconds long. Professional. Clean. Someone who knew the system. The police asked me questions. I answered them. I did not mention the folder. I took it home that night. That is the part one have never told anyone. Not the police. Not my supervisor. Not even myself, in the moments when I try to pretend I made a different choice. I took the Langley folder. I put it in my bag. I walked out of the building with it, and I did not look back. I told myself I was protecting the records. That if someone wanted them badly enough to break in, they would try again, and the safest place for them was with me. That is what I told myself. The truth was simpler. I wanted to know what was in that folder. I wanted to know why someone had left it open on the table. For me to find, for me to take, for me to finally see. That night, I sat in my apartment. The folder was on my kitchen table. I had not opened it yet. My hands were flat on either side of it. My gloves were still on. I did not sleep. The next morning, I found the second note. It was in my desk drawer. The same cream-colored envelope. The same handwriting. Your gloves are never off in public. But they were off last night, in your apartment, for 11 minutes. I know what is under them. I have known since the evacuation. E.B. I read it 4 times. The first time, shock. The second time, fear. The third time, something I did not have a name for. The fourth time, the slow, cold realization that Evander Blackthorne had been watching my apartment. He was waiting for me at the annex. I found him there that afternoon, standing in the restored room he had mentioned in his first note. The annex was a small building behind the main archives, originally built as a carriage house, now converted into a quiet reading room with high ceilings and tall windows. The door was unlocked, just as he had said. He was standing by the window. His back was to me. He was holding a cup of tea, and he did not turn around when I entered. "You had me followed," I said. "No." My voice was not steady this time. "You knew I took my gloves off. You knew the time. You knew it happened in my apartment." He turned. His face was calm. Not defensive. Not guilty. Just calm. "I had someone watch the building," he said. "Not you. The building. After the break-in, I assumed whoever left that folder would return. I was right." I stared at him. "They saw you in your apartment window," he said. "And they saw you with your gloves off. That is all. That is all." Hollis. My name. In his voice. Soft, but not gentle. The kind of soft that knows it can hold weight. "You have been hiding your hands for 7 years, he said. "I already knew that. I already knew why. The only thing I did not know was whether you would ever let anyone see them." I did not answer. He set down his tea. He walked toward me. Not fast. Not slow. The pace of a man who had already decided what he was going to say. "I am not asking you to show me," he said. "I am telling you that I know, and I am still here. That is all. That is the only thing that matters." I stood in the doorway of the annex. My hands were in my pockets. My gloves were on. And for the first time in 7 years, I wanted to take them off. I did not. But I wanted to. That night, I opened the Langley folder. The records inside were not what I expected. They were not property deeds or business licenses or any of the routine documents I had processed for years. They were older. Much older. Handwritten ledgers from the 1970s, recording payments made to municipal officials. Names. Amounts. Dates. And one name appeared more than any other. Cormac Hale. I looked at the name. I had not said it out loud in 7 years. I had trained myself not to think it. But there it was, written in someone else's hand, from a time before I had ever met him. My ex-husband's name. In a sealed file. In a folder someone had left open on a table. In a room that should have been locked. In an archive where I had worked for 7 years without ever knowing it existed. I closed the folder. I put it in my bag. I did not sleep that night either. The medical appointment was not my idea. It was Detective Dorian Pike's idea, and he had made it sound like a suggestion when it was clearly an order. Routine checkup, he had said. Standard protocol for witnesses involved in an active investigation. The break-in, the folder, the sealed records. They had all become part of something larger than I had realized, and the department wanted to make sure I was not hiding any injuries. I told them I was not injured. They insisted anyway. The clinic was private. Small. The kind of place that did not ask questions about how you got your scars because they already knew the answer. The doctor was a beater named Dr. Reyes, and he looked at my file before he looked at me. "Mr. Mercer." "Yes. I need to examine your hands." I had known this was coming. I had prepared for it. I had worn my gloves as usual, and I had told myself that I could refuse, that I had the right to refuse, that no one could force me to remove them. But Dorian Pike was standing in the corner of the room, and Evander Blackthorne was in the waiting room. And I was tired. So tired of hiding. I took off my gloves. Dr. Reyes did not flinch. He had seen worse. He methodically examined the scar tissue, the old burns that covered both hands, the places where the skin had healed wrong, the places where it had never healed at all. He asked questions. I answered them in monosyllables. He made notes. Dorian Pike watched. His face was professional. Unreadable. I could not look at any of them. When it was over, Dr. Reyes said he wanted to run blood work. Something about prolonged suppressant use and stress levels. I nodded. I put my gloves back on. My hands were shaking. I walked out of the examination room. Evander Blackthorne was in the hallway. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, not looking at his phone, not pretending to be busy. He looked up when I came out. His eyes went to my hands, gloved again, hidden again. He did not say anything. I stood in the hallway. The lights were too bright. The air smelled like antiseptic and decisions I had not been ready to make. I am fine, I said. I know. I do not need anyone to take care of me. I know. I looked at him. He was looking at my face. Not my hands. My face. Then why are you here? He considered the question. Not like he was searching for an answer. Like he was deciding whether I was ready to hear the one he already had. Because I do not trust the department to keep you safe, he said. And because I told you the annex door is never locked. That was not a polite offer. That was a promise. I did not know what to do with that. I stood in the bright hallway with my gloved hands at my sides, and I felt something crack open in my chest. Something I had been holding closed for 7 years. Evander. My voice said his name before I decided to say it. He stepped closer. Not close enough to touch. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence. Close enough that the scent of him, cedar and something clean, something that did not belong in this sterile building, reached me before I could prepare for it. Yes. I opened my mouth to say something. I do not know what. Something true. Something I had never said to anyone. But the words did not come. He waited. Patient. Still. The kind of stillness that does not demand anything. I looked at his mouth. I do not know why. I did not plan it. But my eyes moved to his lips, and I saw the exact moment he noticed, because his breath changed. Just slightly. A fraction of a second where he inhaled differently. Tell me to leave, he said, and I will leave. I did not tell him to leave. He moved closer. His hand came up, slowly, the way you approach something that might startle. His fingers touched my jaw. Gentle. The gentlest touch I had felt in 7 years. I closed my eyes. His thumb traced the line of my cheekbone. Once. Twice. The touch was asking a question. The only question. I leaned forward. My eyes were still closed. I felt the air change between us. I felt his breath on my lips. I felt the proximity of something I had stopped believing I deserved. And then, footsteps. Voices. Someone coming down the hallway. I pulled back. His hand fell. I opened my eyes. He was looking at me, and his expression was not frustration or disappointment. It was patience. The patience of a man who had already decided he would wait as long as it took. Another time, he said. Not a question. I did not answer. But I did not say no. That night, I sat in my apartment. The Langley folder was on the table. My gloves were on. My hands were still shaking. I thought about the way he had touched my jaw. The way he had said another time like it was a certainty, not a hope. I thought about Cormac Hale. The way he had touched my jaw. The way he had said you belong to me like it was a fact, not a threat. They were not the same. I knew that. But knowing something and believing it are not the same thing. And I did not know yet whether I was capable of believing. I took out my phone. I looked at the contact I had saved. Just EB, no full name, no company title. I had not called him. I had not texted him. I typed a message. Thank you for being there today. I stared at it. Then I deleted it. I put my phone face down on the table. I opened the Langley folder. I started reading again, because it was easier than thinking about what had almost happened in that hallway. The records went deeper than I had expected. Names I recognized. Transactions that should have been public. And a pattern, careful, deliberate, spanning decades, of someone using the municipal archives to bury evidence. Cormac Hale was not just in these records. He was the central figure. The architect. I had married a man who had been running a criminal operation for 20 years before I ever met him. And somewhere in these files, in the pages someone had left for me to find, was the reason he had married me. It was not love. It was access. I closed the folder. I thought about the burn scars on my hands. The fire I had always told myself was an accident. The alarm. The frequency. The room I had been locked in. He had not married me because he wanted me. He had married me because I worked at the archives. And now, 7 years later, the same archives held the truth he had been trying to bury. I sat in my kitchen, alone, and I did not cry. I had stopped crying years ago, but I felt something shift in my chest. Something that had been frozen for so long I had forgotten it was there. It was not hope. It was the beginning of anger. And anger, I knew, was the first step toward surviving. The note was in my locker. Not an envelope. Not cream-colored paper. A torn piece of copy paper, folded once, shoved through the vent slot. The handwriting was blocky, deliberately illegible. The kind of writing that did not want to be recognized. I read it standing in front of my open locker, my coat still on, my bag still over my shoulder. You think he is protecting you. He is not. He is using you the same way Cormac did. You are a key, not a person. You have always been a key. I read it twice. The first time, my stomach dropped. The second time, something cold settled in my spine. Not fear. Recognition. Someone in this building had known about Cormac. Someone had known about the archives. Someone had known about me. I folded the note. I put it in my pocket. I closed my locker. I went to my desk and started my shift like nothing had happened. That was the survival instinct. Keep moving. Do not react. Do not give them the satisfaction of seeing you break. But I could not stop thinking about the word. Key. It was the same word I had found in the Langley files. The same word Cormac had used once, years ago, in a moment I had tried to forget. You are the key, Hollis. You just do not know it yet. I had not understood what he meant then. I was beginning to understand now. The second break-in happened 3 days later. This time, they did not bother with subtlety. The front door was forced. The alarm system was disabled. The stack room was ransacked, cabinets open, files scattered, the floor covered in paper. And my desk was emptied. Every drawer pulled out. Every file flipped through. The personal items I kept in my bottom drawer, a spare pair of gloves, a photograph of my mother, a book I had been reading during lunch, were dumped on the floor. I stood in the doorway and looked at the mess. The police arrived. Dorian Pike arrived. The building supervisor arrived. Everyone asked the same questions. Had I seen anything? Had I heard anything? Did I know anyone who would want to harm me? I said no to all of it. I did not tell them about the note. I did not tell them about the Langley folder. Still in my bag, still at my apartment, still unreturned. I did not tell them that I had been sleeping with it under my pillow. Because I knew, now, that the leak was inside. Someone in this building had left that note. Someone in this building had known my locker combination. Someone in this building had watched me take the Langley folder and had not stopped me. Because they wanted me to have it. The question was, why? I found Evander at the annex that evening. He was sitting at the long table by the window, a cup of tea in front of him, a folder open in his hands. He looked up when I entered. His eyes went to my face, then to my hands, gloved, as always, then back to my face. Someone left a note in my locker, I said. They called me a key. He closed the folder, set it aside. What else did it say? That you are using me the same way Cormac did. His expression did not change, but I saw his hand, the one resting on the table, tighten slightly. The only sign. Are you? I asked. Using you? Yes. He stood up, walked to the window. His back was to me. I watched his shoulders rise and fall with a breath he was taking deliberately. I have been searching for the truth about your ex-husband for 3 years, he said. Before I ever met you. Before I knew you existed. I bought the property adjacent to the archives because I suspected the records were there. I renovated the annex because I needed access. I was at the archives the night of the fire because I had finally found proof that the sealed files existed. He turned around. Everything I did was calculated. Except you. I did not move. I did not plan to meet you, he said. I did not plan to notice your hands. I did not plan to follow you to the clinic. I did not plan to almost kiss you in a hallway. He said it directly. No hesitation. No softness to soften the truth. You are not a key to me, Hollis. You are a person I did not expect to find. I stood in the doorway of the annex. My hands were in my pockets. The note was still in my pocket. The Langley folder was still in my bag. I do not know if I believe you, I said. I know. I do not know if I can trust anyone. I know that too. He walked toward me. Stopped a step away. Not close enough to touch. Close enough that I could smell him again. Cedar, clean. The scent that had been following me into my dreams. You do not have to decide tonight, he said. You do not have to decide tomorrow. But I need you to know one thing. What? I am not going anywhere. It started with a tremor. I was at my desk. Mid-afternoon. Sorting digital records. The work was routine. The kind of mindless task that usually calmed me. But my hands were shaking. Not the fine tremor of caffeine or nerves. Something deeper. Something that started in my bones. I took off my gloves. My hands looked normal. The scars were the same. But the skin felt wrong. Too warm. Too sensitive. Like the nerves were waking up after years of silence. I put my gloves back on. The tremor did not stop. By 4 o'clock, I could not concentrate. The words on the screen blurred. The lights were too bright. The air in the reading room felt thick, heavy, like the building was breathing too close to me. I left early. I told my supervisor I had a headache. The lie was thin, but she did not question it. I made it to my apartment. I made it to the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror and watched my body betray me. The flush on my cheeks. The dilation of my pupils. The way my breath had gone shallow, almost panting. I recognized the signs. I had suppressed them for years. But the suppressants, the ones I had taken every morning for 7 years, had stopped working. The stress. The trauma. The prolonged use. My body was done waiting. I was going into heat. I did not call him. That is the first thing I need you to understand. I did not call Evander Blackthorne. I did not text. I did not send any signal that I needed help. I had spent 7 years surviving alone, and I was not going to break that pattern because of biology. I locked the door. I closed the curtains. I filled the bathtub with cold water. I had a system. I knew what to do. But the heat came faster than I expected. Harder. The kind that did not build slowly but crashed over me like a wave I had been outrunning for years. I made it to the bathroom floor. My back against the wall. My gloves still on. My body shaking. The scent filled the room. My scent. Omega. Unmistakable. The kind of scent that travels through walls, through doors, through every barrier I had ever built. I pressed my palms to my face and waited. I do not know how long I was on the floor. Long enough for the cold tile to warm beneath me. Long enough for the need to become unbearable. Long enough that I stopped thinking in words and started thinking in instincts. Hide, survive, alone, safe, alone, alone, alone. Then the knock. 3 raps. Firm. Measured. Hollis. His voice. Through the door. Through the haze. I did not answer. Another knock. I can smell you. I closed my eyes. Of course he could. An alpha with his instincts. He had probably smelled it from the street. Go away, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. I am not going away. I heard him try the door. Locked. A pause. Then his voice again, lower, closer. He had pressed his mouth to the wood. I am going to sit outside your door, he said. I will not come in. I will not try to open it. But I will be here until you tell me otherwise. I did not tell him otherwise. The minutes passed. Or hours. I do not know. Time did not matter. What mattered was the sound of his breathing through the door. The knowledge that someone was there. Someone who was not demanding anything. I crawled to the door. I pressed my palm to the wood. I did not open it. Evander. Yes. I am afraid. A pause. Then his voice, softer than I had ever heard it. I know. If you come in here, I will not be able to stop myself. I know. He was not moving. I could feel his presence through the door. Solid. Warm. Waiting. I am not going to come in, he said. I am going to sit here until the worst passes. And if you need me to stay longer, I will stay longer. And if you need me to leave, you say the word, and I will leave. Why? A long silence. Because I have been waiting for you to trust me, he said. And I will not break that by taking what you are not ready to give. I pressed my forehead to the door. I felt the wood against my skin. I felt the heat still burning through my body. Talk to me, I said. Just talk to me. So I know you are still there. He started talking. About the annex. About the restoration work he had done on old buildings. About his father, who had been an architect. About the way light fell through the windows of the reading room at 4 in the afternoon. His voice was steady. Even. The kind of voice that anchors you when everything else is drifting. I listened. And I stayed on my side of the door. Morning came. The heat receded, slowly, like a tide pulling back. I was still on the floor. My body was exhausted. My throat was dry. But the desperation was gone. I opened the door. He was sitting against the wall across from the door. His jacket was off. His sleeves were rolled up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He had not slept. He looked up at me. I was still wearing my gloves. I am going to make you tea, he said. And then I am going to leave. If you want me to come back, you call me. If you do not, I will understand. He stood up. He walked past me into the kitchen. He turned on the kettle. I stood in the doorway of my apartment, watching him move through my space like he belonged there. He did not touch me. He did not try to hold me. He made tea, set it on the counter, and walked to the door. The annex is open, he said. Whenever you are ready. He left. I sat at my kitchen table. The tea was warm. The sun was coming through the window. And for the first time in 7 years, I felt something that was not fear. I did not know what to call it yet. But I knew it was not fear. The press conference was not about me. That is what I told myself when I saw the news alert on my phone. Municipal corruption investigation. New evidence surfaces. I told myself it was about the records, the sealed files, the decades of payoffs and cover-ups. I told myself I was a footnote at best. I was wrong. I arrived at the archives at my usual time. The building was quiet. Too quiet. The front lobby was empty. No receptionist, no security guard, no early morning staff milling around with coffee cups. The lights were on, but the building felt hollowed out. I walked to my desk. The stack room door was open. I stopped. I had locked it myself the night before. I had checked it twice. I had the only key, the permanent access credentials that Cormac had arranged for me years ago, the ones I had never understood until recently. The door was open. The light was on. And inside, standing around the central table, were 8 people I did not recognize. Journalists. Cameras. A woman in a sharp blazer holding a microphone. And on the table, spread out like evidence in a trial, were copies of the Langley files. Pages I had never shown anyone. Pages I had kept hidden in my apartment. Pages that should have been impossible for anyone else to access. The woman in the blazer looked up. Mr. Mercer. We were hoping you would join us. I did not ask how she knew my name. I did not ask how she had gotten the files. I stood in the doorway of the stack room, my gloves on, my hands at my sides, and I watched her smile. Can you confirm that these records were in your possession? I said nothing. Can you confirm that you removed sealed municipal records from this building without authorization? The cameras turned toward me. The microphones lifted. I heard the shutters clicking like insects, each sound a small death. Cormac Hale's ex-husband, someone said. Not to me. To the room. Omega. Works in the archives. Had access to everything. I felt the words land on my skin like burns. I had spent 7 years hiding. 7 years being invisible. 7 years believing that if I stayed small enough, quiet enough, careful enough, no one would ever look at me the way they were looking at me now. I was wrong. The questions came faster than I could process. Did you know about the corruption? Did you help him hide the evidence? How long were you involved? Are you still in contact with him? Are you protecting him? I opened my mouth. No sound came out. The cameras kept flashing. The woman kept smiling. And I stood in the doorway of the room where I had spent years of my life, and I realized that I had never left the cage. I had just traded one jailer for another. I do not remember how I got out of the room. I remember the hallway, the stairs, the fire door that led to the loading bay. I remember the cold air hitting my face and the sound of my own breathing, ragged and loud in the empty alley. I leaned against the wall. My hands were shaking so badly I could not make them stop. The scars under my gloves ached. Phantom pain. Or real pain. I could not tell the difference anymore. I heard footsteps behind me. I did not turn around. Mr. Mercer. A voice I did not recognize. Male. Professional. Not Evander. I turned. The man was in his 40s. Gray suit. Badge on his belt. Detective. Not Doreen Pike. Someone else. Someone I had never seen before. He was holding a folder. I need to ask you a few questions. I looked at the folder. I looked at his face. I looked at the sky, gray and indifferent, and I thought about how strange it was that the world kept turning when everything inside me had stopped. Ask, I said. He asked. I answered. And by the time it was over, I had given them everything. The Langley files. The break-ins. The note in my locker. The name Cormac Hale. The years I had spent married to a man who had only wanted me for my access. I told them the truth. And I knew, even as I said it, that the truth would not matter. Because the story was already written. The headline was already set. Omega archivist tied to corruption scandal. That was what they would remember. Not the evidence. Not the years of abuse. Not the scars. Just the accusation. He found me on the bench behind the loading bay. I do not know how long I had been sitting there. Long enough for my hands to stop shaking. Long enough for the cold to settle into my bones. Long enough that I had stopped thinking and started simply existing. He sat down next to me. Not close enough to touch. Not far enough to feel alone. He sat, and he did not say anything, and I felt the weight of his presence settle over me like a coat I had not asked for. The press conference was staged, he said finally. I did not respond. Cormac leaked the files. He wanted you to be the face of the scandal. He wanted everyone to believe you were his accomplice, because if you are the accomplice, you cannot be the witness. I turned my head. Looked at him. You know that. Yes. And you still believe me. He met my eyes. His were steady. Unwavering. I never stopped believing you. I looked away. The concrete was cold beneath my feet. The loading bay doors were rusted. The world was ordinary and ugly and exactly the same as it had always been. They are going to destroy me, I said. They are going to try. I felt his hand. Not on my shoulder. On the bench beside me. Palm flat. Fingers slightly spread. An invitation. Not a demand. I looked at his hand. I looked at my own. Gloved, hidden, safe. I did not take his hand. But I did not move away. That was the first step. I did not know it then. But that was the first step toward something I had never believed I deserved. The headlines came out the next morning. Archivist in corruption probe. Omega with access to sealed records. Ex-husband of accused conspirator. They did not use my name in all of them. But they used enough. I did not leave my apartment. I did not answer my phone. I sat on my couch, fully dressed, gloves on, and I watched the news cycle turn my life into a story that was not mine anymore. At noon, there was a knock. I did not move. The door opened. I had not locked it. Evander Blackthorne walked in. He was carrying a bag of groceries. He set it on my kitchen counter. He took off his coat. He hung it on the back of my chair. And then he sat down across from me and said, "I am not leaving." I looked at him. "I do not have anything to offer you," I said. "I did not ask for anything." "You should. Everyone eventually does." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands open, vulnerable, an alpha presenting his palms to an omega, the oldest gesture of trust in our biology. "The only thing I want," he said, "is for you to stop believing that you have to pay for being loved." I did not cry. I had stopped crying years ago, but something in my chest cracked. Just slightly, just enough to let light in. Detective Dorian Pike started coming by every day. It was professional at first. Follow-up questions. Updates on the investigation. Standard protocol for a witness in an active case. I answered his questions. I signed his forms. I did not think anything of it. But Evander noticed. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened when Dorian's car pulled into the lot. I saw it in the way he stood slightly closer to me when the detective approached. I saw it in the way his scent shifted, from calm to something sharper, something territorial. I did not say anything. I was not sure I was allowed to. But on the 5th day, after Dorian left and the door closed behind him, Evander did not move. He stood by the window. His back was to me. "He cares about you," he said. I looked up from the files I had been sorting. He is a detective. It is his job to care about witnesses. That is not what I mean. I set down the file. The room was quiet. The late afternoon light came through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. "What do you mean?" He turned. His face was hard to read. Controlled. The face of a man who was holding something back. "I mean, he looks at you the way I look at you." I did not know what to say to that. I did not know how to process the weight of those words. "Evander." "I know." He cut me off gently. Not harsh. Just tired. "I know you did not encourage it. I know you did not notice. But I noticed. And I need you to know that it does not change anything." "Does not change what?" He walked toward me. Stopped a step away. Close enough that I could smell him. Cedar and clean. The scent that had become familiar. "Safe. I am not afraid of losing you to him," he said. "I am afraid of losing you to yourself." I felt the words hit me. Direct. Precise. The most honest thing anyone had ever said to me. What does that mean? It means you do not believe you deserve to be chosen. And until you do, no amount of love from anyone else will be enough to keep you. I stood in the middle of my apartment. The light was fading. The shadows were lengthening. And I was looking at a man who had seen through every wall I had ever built. "You do not know that," I said. "Yes, I do. Because I have been where you are. And I know that the only way out is to decide, consciously, deliberately, that you are not going to leave before they do." He held my gaze. "I am not going to leave, Hollis. But you have to decide whether you are going to stay." That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. "Afraid of losing you to yourself." I had never heard it phrased that way before. I had never thought of my own self-destruction as something someone else could fear. I thought about Dorian Pike. The way he looked at me. The way he asked questions that went beyond the investigation. The way he found reasons to stay a few minutes longer. I thought about Evander. The way he noticed. The way he said it out loud instead of letting it fester. I thought about Cormac. The way he had owned me. The way he had told me I belonged to him, and I had believed him, because I did not know that belonging could look different. I sat up in bed. I took off my gloves. I looked at my hands in the dark. The scars were silver in the moonlight. Ugly. Permanent. The record of everything I had survived. I had never shown them to anyone voluntarily. I had never let anyone see me. But I was tired. So tired of hiding. I picked up my phone. I typed a message. "Tomorrow. The annex. 8 in the morning." I sent it before I could change my mind. Then I lay back down, and I waited for the sun to rise. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk. The archives had reopened, though the reading room was quieter than usual. Most of the public did not want to be associated with a scandal. I did not blame them. I did not want to be associated with it either. Detective Dorian Pike's name appeared on my phone. I answered. We got him. I did not ask who. I did not need to. How? Financial records. The ones you gave us from the Langley files. They tied directly to accounts we had been tracking for 3 years. Cormac Hale is in custody. His network is being dismantled as we speak. I sat in the silence of my desk. The words did not feel real. 7 years of hiding. 7 years of fear. And now, a phone call in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. Hollis, are you there? Yes. You are safe now. Do you understand? It is over. I said yes again. I hung up. I sat at my desk and waited to feel something. The relief did not come. I wanted it to. I wanted to feel the weight lift. I wanted to believe that the nightmare had ended and I could finally breathe. But something in my chest would not let go. A knot that had been tied so long I could not feel where it began or ended. I went home. I made tea. I sat on my couch and watched the news coverage of Cormac Hale's arrest. His face on the screen. Handcuffs. Flashing cameras. The same man who had locked me in rooms and taught me to fear the sound of alarms. He looked smaller on television. Older. Diminished. I did not feel better. I felt nothing. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and waited for the safety to arrive. It did not. Instead, I thought about the Langley files. All the names I had seen. All the transactions. All the years of corruption buried in sealed records. And I thought about one name that had appeared only once. A single entry. In the margin of a ledger from 1998. B. Hale. I had assumed it was a bookkeeping error. An abbreviation for a business entity. But now, with Cormac in custody and the investigation winding down, I could not stop thinking about it. B. Hale. Not Cormac. Someone else. I got out of bed. I opened the Langley folder. I found the page. The handwriting was faded, but the entry was clear. A payment made to a holding company registered in a name I did not recognize. The amount was small, the smallest in the entire ledger. Easily overlooked. But it was there. And if there was one entry I had missed, there could be others. I stayed up until dawn, going through every page. By the time the sun rose, I had found 7 more. 7 payments. 7 different names. All connected to the same holding company. A company registered to someone named B. Hale. I closed the folder. I put it in my bag. I did not call Dorian Pike. I did not call Evander. I sat in my kitchen as the light changed from grey to gold, and I realized that the nightmare was not over. It had just changed shape. I made the decision the next morning. It was not dramatic. There was no moment of revelation. I simply woke up, looked at the ceiling, and understood that I could not stay. The holding company. The name in the ledger. The payments that spanned decades. Cormac was in custody, but someone else was still out there. Someone who had been running the operation longer than Cormac had. Someone who knew about the archives. Someone who knew about me. And if I stayed near Evander, near the annex, near anyone I cared about, they would become targets. I had seen it before. I had seen what happened to people who got close to me. My mother. My friends. Every person who had ever tried to love me had ended up hurt. Not because I wanted them to be. Because I was the key. And keys attract locks. And locks keep people out. I got dressed. I packed a bag. I left the Langley folder on the kitchen table, addressed to Dorian Pike, with a note that explained everything I had found. Then I took Evander's coat. It was hanging on the back of my chair, where he had left it the day before. White. Wool. Expensive. I took it because I needed something to hold. Something that smelled like him. I folded it neatly. I placed it on my bed. I walked out the door. I did not know where I was going. That was the terrifying part. I had spent 7 years planning my escape from Cormac, but I had never planned what came after. I had never imagined a world where I was free and still running. I took a bus to the edge of the city. Then another bus. Then I walked. The roads turned from paved to gravel. The buildings turned from to sparse. I kept walking until my legs ached and my gloves were soaked with sweat. I ended up at a motel. The kind with flickering neon and thin walls. I paid cash. I took a room at the end of the building. I locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floral wallpaper and waited for the guilt to catch up with me. It did not take long. I had left without saying goodbye. I had left without explanation. I had left Evander's coat on the bed like a body I could not bear to bury. He would search for me. I knew he would. He was the kind of man who searched. I hoped he would stop. I hoped he would not. I sat on the edge of the bed, alone, in a room that smelled like bleach and cigarettes, and I let myself fall apart. It was quiet. That was the worst part. No screaming. No crying. Just the slow, silent collapse of someone who had been holding themselves together for too long. I pressed my face into my hands, gloved, always gloved, and I waited for the feeling to pass. It did not pass. It settled into my bones and made itself at home. I do not know how long I stayed in that room. Time moved differently. Hours felt like days. Days felt like nothing. I ate when I remembered. I slept when my body gave out. I watched the light change through the thin curtains and thought about nothing. I did not look at my phone. I did not check my messages. I did not want to know how many times Evander had called. But on the third day, I found myself holding his coat. I had not meant to bring it. I had left it on the bed. But when I reached into my bag for something else, my hand touched wool, and I pulled it out. White. Soft. The collar still carried his scent. I held it to my face. I breathed. And for the first time in 3 days, I cried. I was sitting on the floor when the knock came. Not the front desk. Not a housekeeper. A knock that I recognized. Firm. Measured. Patient. I did not move. Hollis. His voice. Through the door. Rough. Tired. Like he had not slept in days. I know you are in there. I know you do not want to see me. But I am not leaving. I pressed my back against the wall. His coat was still in my hands. How did you find me? Your phone. I tracked it. You left it on. I had not thought to turn it off. I had not thought to disappear properly. I had only thought about leaving. I am not going back, I said. I did not ask you to. Silence. I am not going to make you do anything, he said. But I need you to know something. The holding company. B. Hale. It is Cormac's brother. He has been running the operation from prison for 15 years. He is the one who left the Langley files for you. He is the one who wanted you to find the truth. I closed my eyes. We have him too now, Evander said. You did that. You found what no one else found. You finished it. I sat on the floor of a motel room in a town I did not know, holding the coat of a man who had crossed the city to find me. I left your coat, I said. I know. I left it on the bed. I know. I heard him lean against the door. The wood creaked. I do not care about the coat, Hollis. I looked at the white fabric in my hands. I looked at the door. I looked at the life I had been running from for 7 years. What do you care about? A long pause. Then his voice, softer than I had ever heard it. I care about the man who wore it. I sat on the floor, his coat in my hands, his voice through the door. And for the first time in 7 years, I realized that I did not want to run anymore. I wanted to be found. I opened the door. He was standing there. His hair was disheveled. His eyes were tired. He was wearing the same clothes he had been wearing the day before I left. He looked at me. I was still holding his coat. Hi, I said. Hi. And then he pulled me into his arms. Not roughly. Gently. The way you hold something you thought you had lost forever. I pressed my face into his shoulder. The scent of him, cedar, clean, safe, surrounded me. I am sorry, I said. I know. I do not know how to stop running. He held me tighter. Then we will learn together. The building was burning when we got back. I saw the smoke from 3 blocks away. Orange and black, rising like a column of something alive. My first thought was the archives. My second thought was the Langley files. My third thought, the one that mattered, was the vault. The sealed municipal records. The evidence that had not been collected yet. The proof that B. Hale had been running the operation from prison for 15 years. If the fire reached the vault, everything would be lost. Evander's hands were on the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The car accelerated, and we both knew what we were heading toward. Stop the car, I said. No. Evander, stop the car. I have to get the files. He did not stop. He drove faster. Past the police barricades. Past the fire trucks. Past the shouting officers who pounded on his hood. He stopped in front of the burning building. I will get the files, he said. You stay here. No. Hollis. I have the access credentials. The vault will not open without them. You cannot get in without me. He looked at me. The fire reflected in his eyes. The sirens screamed around us. The heat was already pressing against the car windows. If we go in together, he said, we come out together. I nodded. We ran. The building was worse than I remembered. The fire had started on the first floor and spread upward. The stairwell was filled with smoke so thick I could not see my own hands. I kept one hand on Evander's jacket and the other on the railing, and I counted the steps the way I had counted them every day for 7 years. 12 steps to the landing. 18 to the second floor. 15 to the third. The heat was unbearable. The air was toxic. I could feel my lungs burning with every breath. But I kept moving. The vault was on the 4th floor. The stack room. The place where I had spent years of my life. We reached the door. It was still intact. The fire had not reached it yet. I put my hand on the panel. The scanner read my credentials. The permanent access that Cormac had arranged for me years ago. The thing he had given me because he needed a key. The thing that had made me a target. The door clicked open. The vault was untouched. The files were still there. Rows and rows of sealed records, waiting to be discovered. I started grabbing them. Armfuls. I did not know what I was saving. I did not care. I took everything I could reach. Time, Evander said. His voice was tight, calm, controlled. We have 2 minutes, maybe less. The fire is through the ceiling on the 3rd floor. I grabbed another armful. I turned toward the door. And then I heard it. The alarm. The same frequency. The same pitch. The same sound that had been carved into my bones 7 years ago. The building's fire alarm had activated. I froze. My body stopped. My hands stopped. The files slipped from my arms and scattered across the floor. I could not move. I could not breathe. The sound was inside me, under my skin, in my blood. Hollis. I heard his voice, but it was far away, like he was speaking through water. Hollis. Look at me. I could not. He stepped in front of me. His hands came up to my face. He forced my gaze to meet his. Look at me. Only at me. Do not listen to the alarm. Listen to my voice. I looked at him. His eyes were steady. His hands were warm on my face. The alarm was still screaming, but his voice was closer. You are not in that room, he said. You are in the vault. I am with you. There is a door behind us, and we are going to walk through it together. I cannot. Yes, you can. I know you can, because you are the strongest man I have ever met. I did not believe him, but I wanted to. I took a breath. The air was thick with smoke. The heat was pressing against my skin. The alarm was still screaming. I took his hand. We ran. The stairwell was collapsing when we reached it. The fire had eaten through the 3rd floor ceiling. The stairs were twisted. The heat was so intense that I could feel it through my clothes. The handrail was too hot to touch. I did not let go of his hand. We climbed over debris. We ducked under falling beams. The smoke was so thick I could not tell which way was up. But he did not let go. We reached the ground floor. The lobby was unrecognizable. Blackened walls, shattered glass, the ceiling fallen in. The exit was blocked. I stopped. I looked at the pile of burning debris that had been the front entrance. I looked at Evander. His face was streaked with soot. His eyes were wild. But he was still holding my hand. "Other way," he said. He pulled me toward the loading bay. The back exit. The same door I had used the night of the first fire. The same door he had led me through the first time he saved my life. We burst through it. The cold air hit me like a physical force. I gasped. I fell to my knees on the concrete. The sirens were still screaming, but they were outside now, far away, not inside my chest. Evander knelt beside me, his hands on my shoulders, his face in front of mine. "You are safe." I looked at him. His coat was burned. His hair was singed. His hands were shaking. "You came back for me," I said. "I never left." I looked at the burning building behind him. I looked at the files I had saved, scattered on the ground around us. I looked at his face. "Why?" He held my gaze. The fire reflected in his eyes. "Because I love you." I felt the words land in my chest. Heavy, warm, real. I did not know how to answer. I did not know if I was ready. But I knew one thing. I was tired of running. I reached out. I took his hand. "Take me home." The press conference was my idea. Doreen Pike had advised against it. The department had advised against it. Even Evander had looked at me with concern when I told him what I wanted to do. But I had spent 7 years hiding. 7 years being silent. 7 years letting other people tell my story. I was done. I stood at the podium in the municipal press room. The same room where the journalists had ambushed me weeks earlier. The same cameras. The same microphones. The same faces. This time, I was the one holding the files. "My name is Hollis Mercer," I said. "I am an archivist. I am an Omega. And for 7 years, I was married to a man who used me to access sealed municipal records." The room was silent. I opened the folder. I began to read. I read for an hour. The names. The dates. The payments. The cover-ups. The network that had been running for 30 years, hidden in plain sight, protected by silence and complicity. I read about Cormac Hale. I read about his brother. I read about the aldermen, the contractors, the judges, the police officers who had been paid to look the other way. I read about the fire that had destroyed the archives, the one that had nearly killed me. I read about the scars on my hands. When I finished, I looked up. The room was still silent. The cameras were still rolling. The journalists were no longer writing. They were staring. I held up the last page. "This is the complete record of every transaction, every payoff, every crime committed by the Hale network over 3 decades. I have been carrying it for weeks. I am handing it over now." I set the folder on the podium. I am not Cormac Hale's accomplice. I am his survivor. The silence held. Then someone started clapping. One person. Then another. Then the room filled with sound. I stood at the podium, my hands shaking, my gloves still on, and I let myself feel it. Not relief. Not victory. Something quieter. Something that felt like the beginning of peace. The bond was not planned. That is what I tell myself when I think about that night. It was not planned. It was not the result of heat or rut or biology forcing our hands. It was a choice. Quiet. Deliberate. Made in the space between one breath and the next. We were at the annex. The fire had destroyed the main archives. But the annex, the small restored carriage house where Evander had left his first note, was untouched. We had been spending our evenings there, sorting the records I had saved, rebuilding what had been lost. It was late. The windows were dark. The only light came from a single lamp on the long table. I was sitting at the table. He was standing by the window. "I have been thinking," I said. "About what?" I did not look up. I was looking at my hands. The gloves were off. I had taken them off an hour ago, and I had not put them back on. About what it would mean to stop being afraid. He turned from the window. I felt his gaze on me. And what did you decide? I stood up. I walked toward him. I stopped when I was close enough to feel the warmth of his body. I decided that I do not want to be afraid anymore. I reached up. My hands, bare, scarred, visible, touched his face. His breath caught. Are you sure? He asked. I looked at his eyes. I looked at the man who had seen my scars and not looked away. The man who had sat outside my door through the worst of my heat. The man who had walked into a burning building to bring me home. Yes, I said. He leaned forward. The bond mark was gentle. That was the surprise. I had expected pain. I had been taught that bonding was ownership, and ownership was always painful. But his teeth pressed into the curve of my neck, and the sensation was not pain. It was warmth, connection, the feeling of being held from the inside. I gasped. He pulled back. His eyes were dark. His hand was pressed to the mark, as if he could not believe it was real. I love you, he said. I looked at him. At the bond mark on my neck. At the scars on my hands. At the man who had taught me that safety was possible. I love you too. 1 year later, the annex was expanded. It became a public research library, dedicated to preserving municipal records and making them accessible to everyone. The Langley files were digitized. The corruption network was fully exposed. The trials were ongoing. I worked there, every day, in the reading room, where the light came through the windows at 4 in the afternoon. Evander visited often. He brought tea. He sat at the long table and watched me work. I did not wear gloves anymore. The scars were visible. People noticed, sometimes. They did not ask. And if they did, I told them the truth. I survived. That was the end of the story. But it was also the beginning. The alarm system was tested on the first Tuesday of every month. I had not heard that frequency in over a year. Not since the fire. Not since the night I had almost lost everything. When the test began, I was at my desk. The sound filled the reading room. Loud. Sharp. Insistent. I did not flinch. I set down my pen. I looked at the clock. I noted the time, the way I always did. Routine. Normal. Safe. Then I went back to work. Some scars do not disappear. They become part of you. And you learn to carry them without letting them carry you. That is what I learned. That is what I am still learning. And that is why, when the alarm stopped and the silence returned, I was not afraid. I was alive.